Pioneer's got plenty of pilots and tons of different decks out there, so let's take a look at some of them that made some waves on Magic the Gathering Online this weekend, of course with all of the deck lists in the description down below. Now, of course, Cori-Steel Cutter is the latest hot tech across every single format of Magic, and Pioneer, of course, is no exception. The card itself is a powerhouse of a Plan B, or Plan A in some cases, that synergizes with a few different strategies. Now, all of them usually revolve around casting multiple spells per turn in order to generate value. So naturally, this makes the card feel perfectly at home in Pioneer's OG spell slinging list. Izzet Phoenix? Of course, that's what I'm talking about. Phoenix is rising from the ashes once again after not really falling too far down, but just taking a bit of a backseat to the Demon and Mice decks that have been flying around recently. Now, take this list by pilot_Joseba_ that took the base of the list and cut some of like the nice to have cards like Cross-Eidetic Memory, Temporal Trespass, and some utility cards like Brazen Borrower in order to put in a full playset of the new Tarkir equipment. Now, since Phoenix is already a deck full of low mana cost cantrips and burn spells, Cori-Steel Cutter slots in without really detracting from the main game plan of casting 3 spells to recur the namesake Arclight Phoenix, even though it only cares about 2, and gives you a reason to play out some of the spells to set up a treasure cruise on turns that you don't have a flying Phoenix army to bring back from your graveyard. Now, in the worst case scenario, Cutter gives Phoenix an additional power and toughness as well as trample, meaning that things like 1/1 flying spirits and other chump blockers are no longer a pain for Phoenix to have to try to cut through. Cutter also plays a very similar role that cards like Young Pyromancer and Third Class Iconoclast have normally done from the sideboard, which allows Joseba to free up slots for things like those utility spells along the lines of Brazen Borrower in the sideboard, as well as being able to put in targeted hate cards like Annul and Redcap Melee for the mono red decks and the Domain Enchantment Overlords Matter decks. And while Phoenix may make the most sense for having Cutter in the list, it's far from the only one that's trying it out in Pioneer to success. Now, taking a step in the more aggressive direction of things, known MTGO grinder Hamuda went back to the Rakdos version of the Prowess/Mice deck and split the difference Manifold Mice with Cori-Steel Cutter to test out how the card would do in a shell that normally goes a little bit more all in on the Callous Sellsword's Burn Together plan. Now, having Slick Shot Show Off gives you very explosive turns, where Monstrous Rage or Infuriate can add a total of 10 damage to your Bird Wizard, while it makes a token to swing alongside whatever 1-drop of choice you put into play on turn number 1 from the deck. So, the fact that the equipped creature also tramples opens up way more turns for a growing prowess threat to be thrown at somebody's face with a Burn Together and actually win the game post-combat, because some of the damage has trampled through and you've been able to put Monstrous Rage on something else, or you've been able to just eke through a little bit of extra damage. Now, while Claim Fame can't really get the equipment back in and of itself, being able to use both halves to trigger one of the cutters on the battlefield already, while potentially bringing back your best threat like one of those Slick Shot Show-Offs with haste and some extra damage, is a great synergy for this Rakdos deck to have. Now, lastly, there are a couple of different decks that are looking to go a bit bigger with Cori-Steel Cutter and play a little bit of a slower game, although not like a full control style, just more of like a mid-range grindy-esque style of play. Now, pilot DookieTrouserMD brought an Izzet list with similar spells to the Phoenix shell itself, but traded out the recursive graveyard threats for the Storm Chaser's talent plus This Town Ain't Big Enough combo, making it so the loop with these cards can trigger the Cutter and place multiple tokens on the battlefield in a single turn cycle. It also utilizes an almost forgotten card in some Phoenix lists in Ledger Shredder, using the double spell aspect of the deck to assist in some card selection, create a potentially growing threat in the air, and help cast our treasure cruise ahead of the curve to restock our hand a lot faster in the sort of prowess style of Izzet that we've seen in Shades of Pioneers past. Now, the deck does have other threats, such as a singleton Crackling Drake, a pair of Screaming Nemesi, whatever, they're both screaming, but it seems to be a little all over the place in how it wants to play outside of the class, cutter, and bounce spell kind of 4 elves in the deck. I do, however, really love the idea that DTMD has put together with the Ledger Shredder angle of attack. That I think that could just kind of be expanded upon in Pioneer. Maybe even looking at adding in cards like Stock Up as an additional way to find the correct spells to cast to maximize the amount of damage that you have, and then maybe looking at some extra copies of like Into the Floodmaw and playing the bounce tempo style game plan that could eventually just swing with a ton of lethal tokens on the board. Now, outside of just Cori-Steel Cutter, I saw pilot Tchuco playing a deck after my own heart in Golgari, Obliterator, Demons, a list that smashes together one of my favorite cards of all time, Phyrexian Obliterator, with the fight/fixing spell Bushwhack, and then with the Unholy Annex plus Demons combo package of the deck. So kind of two base ideas for a deck shell put together into one that turns out to be a pretty cohesive deck list altogether. Now, outside of running 3 Mutavault in your deck with a BBBB spell and a BGB Glissa and a BB Gifted Aetherborn, those things aside, you have Urborg to help fix your mana and stuff, but the multiple Glissa Sunslayers and Gifted Aetherborns halt all sorts of ground assaults, while the big bad Obliterator threatens to eliminate all things an aggro deck has on its board with one quick little fight spell. Now, Unstoppable Slasher in this list does not have its partner in crime, Bloodleather of Aquazotz, to deplete an opponent's hit points in one fell swoop, but it still puts opponents in a bind with Obliterator's Trample, threatening to close out games quickly if it's left unblocked, to try to save what you have on board. So you kind of have to gobble up multiple things with an Obliterator block or block the Slasher ad nauseum, basically giving your opponent a copy of the Abyss in this deck. Now, green gives the deck access to primo removal in the sideboard, like Abrupt Decay, Maelstrom Pulse, and Terra Sunder to help answer things that you can't easily obliterate in a fight. Now, that wasn't the only deck putting a spin on the Demons theme this weekend, as pilot AlexFiero played a mono black deck that kind of went back to the Demon Shell roots and played the aforementioned Slasher Bloodletter of Aquazotz combo alongside Unholy Annex and the OG Demon himself, Archfiend of the Dross, in a mid-range shell that is built different than the ones with Graveyard Trespasser and Gifted Aetherborn. The rest of this deck doesn't seem to care for non-creature spells that happen to hit the board whatsoever. You have 4 Thoughtseize and 2 Duress to deal with them in your hand, while the remaining 10 spells, besides the lands in the deck, are just an assortment of 1 and 2 mana removal spells. There's not a Planeswalker in sight, nor is there a Withering Torment or Feed the Swarm, as this sideboard houses 4 copies of Caustic Bronco to keep your swinging on going, and tons of more removal from cards like Extinction Event to just more cut downs and targeted stuff. Now, I'm assuming Alex really hates mice with a list that is packing more ways to remove them than an exterminator has in his truck. Now, known MTGO player and grinder Claudioh was back at it with a challenge win, utilizing 2 separate Dragonstorm Tarkir Mythics in a single deck, playing a Selesnya Collector's Cage deck that was looking to run over the opponents with incredibly large and incredibly plentiful amounts of tokens. Yeah. Craterhoof Behemoth themselves, alongside Elspeth Stormslayer, create wide and tall token board states that can be played out extremely early thanks to the namesake card Collector's Cage. Now, Sandstorm Salvager is another neat tech piece from Big Score that brings along a golem itself in a Blade Splicer-like fashion, while its activated ability grows all of our tokens while giving them trample. Basically a mini hoof for half of the deck. Now, the rest of the deck helps us generate tokens or advantage in and of itself by using the tokens that other cards make or just providing it themselves. Enduring Innocence and Sanguine Evangelist are there to draw cards for us, while Overlord of the Mistmoors, Voice of Resurgence, hello Dragon's Mage Rare, and Paw Patch Recruit with Offspring cover a lot of the tokens that the deck is trying to make, addition to, Elspeth creating at least one of her own. Now, a bunch of Bezas in the sideboard is a nice touch against aggro, as the life gain is great into non-screaming Nemesis passive boards, while we can get double the fish from that token generation with an Elspeth in play. So Beza is doing a lot more alongside Elspeth if you can get both of them to come out at the same time, like by turn 6. So let me know what you're up to in Pioneer and if any of these lists have sparked your interest. Have you been bit by the Cori-Steel Cutter bug, or are you trying to abrade away all of those equipment on the board? Let me know in the comments down below what you think the best shells for the cutter are, or the best shells at beating the cutter. I personally have made bad financial decisions myself at MXP this weekend and wound up buying 4 Storm Chasers Talents and 4 Cori-Steel Cutters specifically for Standard and Pioneer, so you might see me on the side of wielding 4 blades at once like I'm a character from some sort of anime. However, if you are one on the opposite side, I'd love to hear what you're going to be playing. Now, of course, if you have liked this video, I would suggest becoming one of my members, like these fine folks over here on my side, who help support this video specifically, as well as all of the other videos on my channel with a little bit of extra monetary boost from their support. Now, of course, they do trade this off for great member benefits, such as getting early access to all of my video and written content. They knew about how I was planning to build an Izzet Cori-Steel Cutter list a few days early, maybe a week altogether, as I posted a list up there for members only. They also have Discord access. They have a direct line to me to chat about Magic when I should be working, as well as, like I said, just getting early access to all sorts of content, and then potentially having me look over some of their deck techs as well. So if that is something that sparks your Planeswalker interest, you can just click join down below the video or on my main YouTube channel to show your devotion. But as always, I would just love it if you could tap that subscribe button, because it helps me, but it also helps you stay up to date on my latest deck techs, metagame analysis, and just in general, Magic Gathering content. Happy Cori-Steel cutting!